Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Today, we are joined by Ramesh Reddy, who is a personal injury attorney and a sales manager at EvenUp Law. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about EvenUp Law?
Sure. Yeah, a little bit about myself. So I'm a PI attorney, 15 years growing in practice. Live in New Orleans, Louisiana, great city in the South. I, for the last 4 years have pivoted basically since COVID to working in legal tech. And so I've been in and out of legal tech for most of my career, here and there, dabbling, obviously working with a lot of different platforms in my own PI practice. But essentially where I worked prior to this job was at Litify, which is a premier case management software, primarily for personal injury firms, kind of came out of Morgan & Morgan, about eight years ago, built on Salesforce. And then in the last most recent iteration, I've been working at EvenUp, which is like the premier legal AI company for personal injury firms. So yeah, that's where I've been in the last few years.
Can you tell me a little bit about when people come to EvenUp, what are some of the kind of pain points and problems they're experiencing that you're helping them solve?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So obviously you've heard of AI, right? It's the thing these days, right? Since ChatGPT made it famous just a few years ago, it's hard to believe how short a time it's been and how far we've come. EvenUp is designed for PI firms, right? Personal injury firms and entrepreneurs looking to streamline a lot of the kind of factory line of personal injury. And so what that means is, when a case comes in at intake, right, you get into a car accident and you're like, you don't know what to do. So you call up a lawyer, right? You call up your local lawyer, usually the billboard guy that's on there. And a lot of them are our clients. And you call them up, you do an intake process. And in that process, the personal injury firm is now kind of vetting your case, qualifying your case, seeing if you actually have a claim, right? And so from there, you go into treatment. And as a client, you're going to the doctors and whatnot. And so the personal injury firms are kind of managing all these cases simultaneously, right? They could have hundreds, if not thousands, of people going to treatment. Once treatment is complete, in order to get those, millions of dollars that you see on the billboards, an injury attorney has to send out what they call a demand letter. And that demand letter needs to have certain aspects of the case that's in there, right? Treatments, facts and liability, why this person was injured, who this person is, the things that have damaged them throughout, and then really give a quantification based on case law and other, points as to why this person deserves this much money. Okay. So EvenUp, like 4.5 years, right? We're pre-ChatGPT. We came in order to speed up this bottleneck, which turned out there was a huge bottleneck when it came to this in personal injury firms. I didn't know this as a PI lawyer. I used to draft these demands myself by hand. At scale, I didn't realize this was actually a major problem that most personal injury firms were facing. And so initially when clients came to us 4 years ago, we had built AI really for multiple years, training it and building these models to help us it wasn't consumer facing, it was on our end, to actually generate demand letters to a certain point. And then EvenUp also added experts that, ex-case managers, people that were lawyers, to really refine the process to get it from like a 90% or 85% or whatever it was at the time to a 99% accurate demand letter that you can literally hand over to the personal injury lawyer and say, hey, go send this out or do little tweaks. And that really speeded up the process for it to be sent out. And as a result of that, because now 4.5 years later, we've trained, over 100,000 demand letters and counting on our models, we're actually able to get, what we say 69% higher policy limit 69% higher likelihood of achieving policy limit settlements, which a policy limit settlement is the maximum you can get on that insurance policy for the person that hit you. That's initially what we did. Now these days, AI is like blown up, right? And so we've built things, as you know, I'd mentioned earlier, part of the process, from medical records coming in, having to manage certain aspects of making sure you have bills and records that are accurate, all the way to, if you're negotiating with an adjuster, kind of giving you insights into your case, to talking with your case, kind of like, it's a much more souped up version of ChatGPT. But the idea that you have these documents that you need to sift through and basically get information out of, that's really taking out like the need for having to sift through all these medical records, taking hours and hours, and allowing your team to really talk with the customer more.
What inspired you? I mean, it sounds like you were an extremely early adopter of AI technology. What inspired you to see value in that space before a lot of other people did?
So, I to be fair, the founders who I'm not one of, right? I'm a sales manager, but I think you'd have to, and there's plenty of YouTube videos with Ray kind of talking about the founding of it. The company initially started with litigation financing, and I think what they found was in talking with their customers, right? I think all great businesses, you have to solve a problem, right? At the end of the day, you're looking to solve a problem. A lot of what we've seen recently with AI, especially those who have followed us down this path after they've seen the market, is they're chasing dollars. And of course, like building business is called partnerships for profit, right? The goal is to build a profitable business.
Right.
If you look in time at the businesses that are really successful, they have solved specific problems in certain groups, right? And so for us, we had the benefit of having customers that were personal injury lawyers. And while there are lots of litigation finance companies out there, there really wasn't a company solving this one problem. The big issue with writing demand letters is time, right? And so if you try to outsource it, how are you going to make a business out of that that's unique and different? And I believe at the time, the review of looking into AI was something that spawned within the founder group. And they were able to kind of create a model after many years of training that would actually be good enough to utilize in-house. And then the goal really is, AI is pretty nascent. And so like we it's early. I don't know. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. So like the early .com booms, you had everyone that was a .com. And the ones that have staying power are the ones that are, back with a lot of financing, which were the number one around that in legal tech, and the fastest growing. So we've really solved a problem and then built a connection with our customer. Right. If our founders are out there at the conference circuits with me and talking with other PI lawyers, and these people are our friends as well as colleagues and clients. So that's kind of how it all came to be.
And I'm curious, like where in your years doing it, what trends have you kind of seen come and go in the space, and are there any trends that you foresee coming down the pipeline with it?
Yeah, I think we've been so hyper focused on medical chronologies, which is another part of like tracking medical treatments in a visualized form and summaries and demands, that I think that's been our space for many years. In terms of trends, right? You got to look at, and I'll talk about legal AI generally, because within what we're doing, we're really focused on solving the problems for personal injury attorneys. And so because of that, we know all the steps in their process and bottlenecks along with it and how to solve for it the best that we can. When we think about legal AI, like generally speaking, I think there's I think there has like every vertical is being touched by AI, because law requires so much output of documentation and verbiage. You have this situation where people are like, okay, what parts of every lawyer's process, whether you're a criminal defense lawyer, or whether you're a real estate attorney, whether you're writing trusts, IP law, there's so many situations where you're kind of sifting through records and having to generate either a memo or a brief or things like that. And so I think in terms of trends, I think we're still at the beginning, and I think everyone's throwing things at the wall, kind of like spaghetti against the wall, and seeing what's going to stick and where a business actually lies. I do feel like there's so much of the process that's being kind of changed right now for the better, right? In the end of the day, what this does for personal injury lawyers, what it does for lawyers in general, ultimately what it does for you guys as the consumer, or even me, if I ever consume law, it'll really create a commodification across the industry of certain tools that will bring the price and the costs down for everybody. And I think, if everyone's so afraid of the robots, right, like taking their jobs, I think at the end of the day, it's the goal is how do we get legal services to people at a lower rate than we have in the past. I think it'll be hard to supplant the $1,000 an hour, $2,000 an hour attorneys that are arguing in courtrooms. Like that's not going to happen for a while. But certainly there's a lot of output that associate attorneys, paralegals are doing that we can really kind of enhance their capabilities in a way that they have never seen before, right? We talk about putting an Iron Man suit on our teams to help them do things better and really do the stuff that sucks faster and the stuff that they enjoy better so that they're happier in the workplace. So
being a personal injury attorney working in this AI space, I'm curious, is there any legislation that is not currently in place regarding AI that you think needs to be put in place?
Oh, that's a tough one, man.
I know that's a loaded question.
No, it's I don't,
like if a self-driving car wrecks into another self-driving car, who's to blame? Like that kind of thing.
Right? I mean, there is so much legislation out there today being promulgated. Obviously in the news, you hear a lot about guardrails trying to be put up and in terms of what is the right thing to do. I don't have a direct opinion about what specific legislation that's currently out there is. I would say that, look, I think new technology breeds a couple of things. One, there's an opportunity, right, for things to get better in our society. There's also a dark side, right?
Right.
There's also the potential for things to go completely haywire and awry. And I think we should not be too hasty in terms of like, let's just legislate and regulate and like protect the guild that are our attorneys necessarily. But at the same time, I think you look at Uber as a great example of a company that kind of came in and broke a model, but consumers wanted it. That's why it stayed. Right. And I think you have to see the benefits and weigh those against the costs before judging kind of how to write legislation in place in order to kind of move forward with whatever it is you decide to do. But I do think there are some ethical quandaries that you have to consider. I think as you look around our society, I mean, I've been even seeing like, kids writing, ChatGPT's things and turning them into as work that they've completed in school. And you see this with attorneys too, right? And Morgan & Morgan is a company. There's other ones out there. People are just, I think lawyers themselves need to be concerned around just making sure that the AI is accurate, making sure what they're delivering in court is accurate. And I think right now there needs to be some guardrails around that, or work with companies that you trust that actually are putting up those guardrails to ensure that what you're delivering as an attorney is going to be something that that's accurate.
Yeah. Well, and I want to kind of circle back a little bit because I was curious and I meant to touch upon it and we didn't, but what is the difference between a demand letter that is a well-written demand letter and a demand letter that is a poorly written demand letter? What is the difference between those two? And how can AI help with that,
Yeah. So I think a demand letter that's well-written is there's a couple of components you have to think about. So I'm going to bucket this in different categories. Sure. I'll just explain to you kind of what generally a personal injury claim might look like in case some of the members of your audience don't know, or maybe you don't. Have you been in an accident before?
I've not. See, I was going to say, I consider myself almost completely ignorant to all of this. I mean, imagine that.
Fair enough, man. Well, I believe the data is and this hasn't happened to me yet, but I believe the data is a person's going to experience 6 accidents of some sort in their entire lifetime. So
wow.
I still got a lot to go apparently, but that's just on average. I think people in New Orleans where I live, that's like way higher. And you lived here, right? So there's like an accident all the time in this town, which is why there's
potholes don't help.
No, potholes do not help. Neither do divided streets. So in a personal injury claim, you're going to have different insurance policies at play. Typically, the average policy in Louisiana, for instance, is $15,000, which is not a lot of money, but it's the minimum amount that the law requires you to get on the road. Depending on the state that you're in, you're going to have different, what we call minimum policy limits. And each one of those, again, like New York, it's like $50,000. And here it's 15. I think California is like 25. Mississippi is different. Every state is different in terms of their minimum policy limits. Okay. The average rider is going to have that, and driver. Then you're going to have people that say, okay, I make more money in my life. I want to be more protected, because if my policy is too low and I have assets, if I hit you and I'm at fault, you could sue me for those assets, right? If I have money in the bank, or if I have houses, whatever it is, to pay for my injuries. And we know, medical costs are very expensive. Pain and suffering can be very expensive. And so you're going to want an insurance policy that's more than $15,000 if you have some assets to protect. And so, those can go up depending on the state, typically 50,000, 100,000, $250,000. And then typically in that end, you're going to get umbrella insurance for like $1 million, $2 million, right? Those are regular cars, right? Trucks that you see out there, which is why you might see truck accident attorney or Uber attorney, they're technically insured for typically $1 million, just because they're commercial policies. So you asked the question, what's the demand letter? Like, what makes it good? What makes it bad? And so demand letters, typically for the lower policies, you don't need everything in there. You need some medical records. You need some information. You need ICD codes, which are like codes that they put on for procedures that are going to be in the medical records. And you're going to need some facts, liability information, things like that. Those are for the cheap policies. We can spit those out, relatively quickly when they're sent to us. That's like within a day or so. We've got this new product I'll tell you a little bit about that does that as well, like instantaneously or relatively instantaneously within an hour for you guys. But then you have these huge policies, right? These $1 million policies or 100,000 or more, where you're wanting a more robust demand letter sent out that has a lot of information in there. Typically our demands on the standard demand side, these comprehensive demands can be upwards of 20 pages. It takes a lot of facts and liability, medical summaries, and the goal, ICD codes, quantum analysis of like in this courtroom, in your jurisdiction, how much is this case been valued for something very similar, kind of like comparables that you would see in real estate, right? So that's a lot of information that typically takes a lot of time for a demand writer to generate out of a law firm. Some firms just have hired specifically for that. And so those are kind of different areas depending on the policy limit amount. You're going to want a certain demand letter. And then we have what we've built called express demands, which is really an AI only drafted demand letter that like attorneys can get and paralegals can get right at their computer, just from pulling in information directly from the raw records. So AI, can it write a great demand? It can, depending on the type of policy limit that you want, right? So if you're going to have like a $15,000 policy, we could generate a demand letter for you with AI that's going to be probably as good as you need it to be in order for it to just automatically get sent out. And then, but for these bigger demands, we'll get it to a certain baseline, but I do think it involves a certain amount of human elocution and writing it appropriately or just tweaking it to get it to a place where you're really, you're really benefiting from the insights that a human can provide.
And can you tell me a little bit about, like, I'm curious, because like, what are some of the safeguards that are in place? Because I mean, you know, dealing with the fact that it is, in the legal field, how does it ensure the accuracy of that information? Because I imagine, if it's pulling information that's not accurate, that could be a huge deal.
Totally. No, you're absolutely right. And this is the biggest risk with AI. I think also not just pulling information that's not real or spitting out information that's not real, which is what we've seen as hallucinations with ChatGPT type briefs that lawyers have tried to submit. It's also the concern about your data, right? Like a lot of these are open source systems that people are using. And I'll caution lawyers that are just going on ChatGPT and typing in client information because it is out there. Whether it can be found or not may be a different question. And whether you can be penalized for it or not might be a different question. But the risk is there, right? And so I think about it in terms of if it's not HIPAA compliant, you're going to have an issue. ChatGPT today, as you see it, is not, right? So what are companies doing to kind of combat against that? Well, you can, and again, I'm not so incredibly technically versed in all this. So if there's any of your listeners listening that might be like, he's wrong on that, that might be the case. I'm just putting that disclaimer out there. But how OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, all these big companies that you hear out there, they've spent billions of dollars on systems to kind of generate these LLMs, these large language models. What they're doing is you can pipe in and get a closed system, right? That's how they're making their money. You're literally, paying them a licensing fee or a certain amount to license the foundation, right? Think about it like a house, the foundational elements. And you can piece it together however you like, is my understanding, right? If you need certain components from certain things, you can do that. And so, between OpenAI, Anthropic, you can create these closed loop systems where your data is not being kind of put out to the internet. And you have certain safeguards like HIPAA compliance, especially when it comes with medical records, which in personal injury law, you're dealing with all the time, or just personal information and identifiers. That's all within a closed loop within our system that, again, you're not exposed to kind of some of the elements, so to speak, of being out in the world.
What are some of the big misconceptions about AI in the legal space that you think people have that you'd like to clear up?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is like it's going to replace humans entirely, and I do not believe we're kind of at Terminator level yet. I don't think like I don't think Skynet is here.
No T-1000s yet.
Exactly. Despite what Starlink and Elon might feel like, I think there is a course for that. I just don't think today is the day that you'd have to worry about that right now. I think it's kind of like the .coms, right? Where there's still humans operating behind the scenes. I think what the misconception is that somehow if you're I'll just talk about legal, right? If you're a paralegal out there, or you're a case manager in personal injury, that you're going to be replaced. You're not, because you need the human touch, right? I think part of what makes law special is that there's a human element. Part of what I miss about practicing law is that, you really get the benefit of working with a person in their worst time possible in personal injury, carrying them through, being the therapist at times, being the only person that understands like the pain. And I think the misconception is that you're going to be replaced in your job. Truly, what AI is going to allow you to do in personal injury, at least, is give case managers, paralegals, and attorneys more time back in their day to do the parts that allow for the human connection to happen more, and less of the time of kind of fiddling around with sending an email to an adjuster, or typing a long demand letter out and like looking through documents. Like, you're going to get the ability to have this human connection with another human. Now, there is also this thing with AI agents that is also something that is coming, right? That's here, right? Intake and call centers where you're having human-like voices respond relatively accurately to the person on the other end of the line. Again, I don't think they're at a place yet where the human side of empathy can possibly be there in a way that conveys some message of care deep enough, like you or I would, to someone that we care about. But I do think there are opportunities there. Again, you don't have to be on an intake call. You can be on a call with a person that is actually going through a hard time. So one of those misconceptions is that, like, we're going to replace everybody today. Not happening. Another misconception is that AI is going to solve everything in part of your problems that you have in the personal injury kind of intake to resolution sphere or loop. It's not. What it's going to do is enhance the capability to sift through a ton of information very quickly, so that you can make actionable decisions as a leader of your team, of your group, and just give you that ability to do that, right? Kind of like that Iron Man suit I was talking about. Yeah.
Are you familiar with that concept of the uncanny valley?
No, tell me. I love learning new things.
Oh no. See, this is something that I think is coming with AI, is that there's this concept that they started realizing with CGI animation and kind of animatronics, that the closer that something got to being human without being human, there was this natural, they call it the uncanny valley, this thing you can't get over.
Okay.
There's a revulsion there because it's so human without being human that it kind of freaks you out a little bit. It's a little bit like Megan, that robot girl movie.
Okay.
So strange looking. But do you think that there is going to be I guess my question there is, do you think that there is going to be that hurdle with some of the AI things being so close to human that it's kind of creepy?
I'm sure that will be a hurdle at some point, right?
Because sometimes you hear those agents that are so close to sounding human, and it's kind of like,
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
first
And
time I heard a robot ask for my order in McDonald's, it freaked me out.
I think so. And I think like I can't imagine what and I think about this, I don't know, randomly. I can't imagine what the transition was like from like riding horses to like going to cars,
Right.
And I kind of feel like that is kind of what's happening, right? At a much faster clip, obviously, because technology gets adopted so much faster now. And I hear you. I think when it comes to like replicating human behavior, it's going to be a strange transition, like you mentioned, this uncanny valley. But I do think it'll just become the norm, just like anything else has become the norm. I don't know about you, but like I don't really look at Google as much anymore. I kind of just type things into ChatGPT. It happened very fast. And like you're actually giving me an answer that probably is just as accurate as Google. I mean, I might go check on it. But do you use ChatGPT much? Do you use AI much in your?
Oh
in your
yeah.
field?
Yeah. Well, and I'm in a creative space, so I'm like, I'm very interested in the, image generation of it all.
Okay.
I mean, do you think the image generation aspect of AI coming up is going to have any impact in the legal field?
Sure. Yeah. So if you think about what litigators do, if you go into the courtroom, and we saw our friend Donald do this the other day with the tariffs, right? Like, despite all the technology he has, he comes out with a board that shows the different tariff things, right? Pointing to it, a physical board. And you see, very esteemed litigators in the fields, like they'll have videos, they'll have all sorts of stuff in a courtroom, but there's nothing like just a board that you can hold up, a physical 3-dimensional shape that you can look at and share with the jurors, right? For multi-million-dollar cases, believe it or not. And we do this too at EvenUp. Like we have medical chronologies that our attorneys will take into court and utilize in order to show that this is whatever the medical chronology situation is for this person, the summaries of the documents and things and their treatment. So yeah, I do believe that AI will generate these probably at a much cheaper rate than maybe Fiverr can for the attorney. And certainly going to be, those images will kind of come a lot faster and easier.
When people come to EvenUp, is it sort of a one-size-fits-all strategy, or are the strategies very highly custom tailored to each individual client?
So I think when you focus on a vertical, right, and we're a software as a service business, and some companies, my former company, Litify, started in personal injury, but started branching out into different areas. And I think the risk and the benefit of doing that's like you increase your TAM, your total addressable market, right? Now you solve a problem here, we're going to go over here. And you see a lot of companies do this. The risk there is that you lose your customers, and in a way that like you cannot be everything for everyone. And I'm seeing this happen at Litify, Filevine, other companies where they're literally like, we are trying to expand our total addressable market. We're going to add AI features in to try and capture some dollar or wallet share, as we call it. The reality is when your product team is starting to focus on different areas all at once, it becomes a challenge to deliver an incredible product. I think about Steve Jobs back in the late 90s when he came on to Apple, right? Like they were building printers, and so he went in and he slashed everything. And he's like, we're going to do these 4 things really well. And the iPod obviously was one of the biggest hits that turned into the iPhone and all that stuff, mainly because you focus. And so for us, it is not, it's a one size fits all in the sense that like, if you are a personal injury firm, and we sell to solo lawyers all the way to, Sweet James and the biggest law firms in the country, you can benefit from our services, whether that's a demand letter, medical chronology, express demands, which is our ability to kind of generate these AI driven demands just for you, where you can kind of manipulate it how you want, to like matching bills and records that you need in order to get a demand ready, to being negotiation ready, where like we're showing you insights on your case, to asking your case questions. Like you can be a solo lawyer like me, which would get a ton of benefit out of it because I won't need a ton of staff to do things that normally you would to get that information. Or you could be a massive firm processing thousands of cases. It doesn't matter. The problems are still essentially the same, except they're on different levels of scale, right? If you're a massive company like Sweet James, you're dealing with millions and millions and millions of dollars of efficiency savings. Whereas if you're a solo lawyer like me, maybe you're dealing with thousands and thousands of dollars of efficiency savings. The benefits are going to be incredible for you, regardless of where you are. So that's the thing. And I think these days, if you're a solo or small firm lawyer, if you want to scale your business, there's no question you have to utilize AI. And then if you're a massive company, if you're not leveraging AI, then what you're doing is you're leaving a lot of dollars on the table, and know that defense counsel is going to do it. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to suit up, so to speak, in order to kind of match what's required in the marketplace.
Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation. If anybody out there listening could use your help, could use the help of EvenUp Law, where can the people find you?
Yeah, I mean, just type in EvenUp on the internet. That's on Google or ChatGPT. You'll be directed to our website. My email's probably going to be in some show notes, but it's ramesh.reddy@evenuplaw.com. Feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, I'm happy to be there.
Ramesh, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Partnerships for Profit, presented by Leduc Entertainment. Ramesh, thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.